Christine Lagarde has been named the new head of the International Monetary Fund. Joining us to discuss what this means, let's bring in Alessandro Leipold, the former acting director of the IMF's European Department. He joins us on the phone from Washington. Mr. Leipold, welcome to Bottom Line. Pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Mark. Pleasure to be on.
Sir, what's the significance of Ms. Lagarde's appointment today?
Well, you know, like a lot of things in life, there's two sides to this coin. There's certainly a shiny side, which are Christine Lagarde's undoubted talents and skills, and I can speak a bit to that later on, given that I got to see these firsthand when I was mission chief for the IMF for France for several years. But there's also a tarnished side of the process not having really fundamentally changed, and leading again to European leader of the fund at the time, which Europe, one can argue, does not really deserve this honor. It's not exactly Europe's shining moment.
Sir, why do you say they don't deserve it?
Well, for the way they've handled, or rather perhaps more correctly, mishandled the Greek crisis, they've just made too many mistakes from the very start. There's too many stakes in the game for Europe, for individual European countries.
Right.
And since you've started on that, I can say that what will be important is for Christine Lagarde to really demonstrate that objective detachment and that she can be an impartial arbiter in all this, really to divorce herself from the past and become a true international civil servant rooted in the fund's rules, traditions, history, experience, and so on. It's interesting that, you know, in a statement to the board, she devotes almost a full page to addressing the issue of whether there's any conflict of interest, and then she will have to live up to her rejection of that notion.
Mr. Leipold, you say mistakes were made at the outset. In your opinion, what was the most critical flaw, the most critical mistake that was made?
Well, right at the beginning, if you want, was really the delay in reacting. I mean, Europe was first in denial, then gradually sort of admitted that there would need to be some help with official money, but it was always seen as a last resort and, in fact, at punitive interest rates. And then also there was, and this is obviously sort of grave in a way for anybody aspiring to lead the IMF, there was a long objection or opposition to involving the IMF in a euro area country. All of this, I mean, is part of the original sin. It's all been overcome, but it did delay the response, and during that time, interest rate spreads really widened quite considerably and made a difficult crisis even more difficult and costly.
One of the main contenders for the IMF position was Agustin Carstens, the Mexican central banker. His candidacy never picked up steam. There has been an informal agreement between Europe and the United States that the head of the IMF would be a European and the head of the World Bank would be an American. Is it time for that to end? Oh, yeah, it's definitely time for that to end. It's obsolete, it's almost feudal, and it's, I think everybody agrees with that. The reality, however, is that really, even though this process, I think, was definitely more transparent, it was more open and contested than in the past, you had some open campaigning, you had the publication of the candidates' views, you had even at least initially a split in the G7 vote with Canada as declaring its support for customs and another industrial countries such as Australia supporting customs as well. But, you know, the BRICS, the development of the emerging markets are just not in a position to really, they don't have the institutional mechanisms, they don't have the internal cohesion to come behind a single candidate, and this was shown quite clearly. But things are changing. If you think of what happened at the FAO over the weekend, where the European and industrial country candidates, the Spanish Moratinos, was defeated by the Brazilian with the votes of the poor and emerging countries. Right. Some of these deals are now, if you want, showing that their time has come. Mr. Leipold, in our last minute, if I might switch gears specifically to the situation in Greece, Prime Minister Papandreou obviously hoping for this vote that's going to come up to be in his favor. I was just interviewing Edward Altman, the NYU finance professor, where we were talking about the situation in Greece and why people who don't live there should care. How dire is that situation? And even if Greece does receive part of these bailout funds, it is just a short-term solution to a long-term problem, is it not?
Well, to some extent, yes. I mean, I think, as I was saying, one of the mistakes
that Europe has made is to draw out this very long sort of sterile discussion about private sector involvement or restructuring. I don't use the word default because it's so sort of emotionally charged and has a different meaning. One can certainly envisage something that is not a unilateral default, but that addresses the overhang of the debt. Greece simply has too much debt, and that has to be recognized and addressed. And that is one of the things that, well, fortunately, France, amongst others, has taken the lead on that now. And hopefully, Lagarde, one thing that I'm very happy to see is that she's going to start working on very early, in fact, on the 5th of July, next Tuesday.
Right.
And that is essential. That'll come on the heels of whatever the vote is in Greece this week, and of a meeting of European finance ministers over the weekend. So she'll have, the honeymoon won't be long. She'll have her hands full from the very start.
All right. Alessandro Leipold, the former acting director of the IMF's European Department, joining us on the phone from Washington. Mr. Leipold, we appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mark.